Since I was very keen on doing medicine, I sat for national entrance exams like for the Armed Forces Medical College and Velo Medical College, and of course I got into both, and the results of AFMC were ahead of the results of CMC. So, and AFMC is it's one of the two top medical schools in India. We have like 85,000 applicants and 120 get in. So when I got the interview call, I was like, oh wow, I couldn't believe it. And out of the 700 that were selected, they finally narrowed us to 120 with 20 girls and 100 boys. And I was fortunate enough to get into the medical school. And I think the medical school, again, was fantastic in the fact that AFMC has a very overall way of developing an individual. I mean, we learn medicine, but they also help us in our extracurricular activities like sports and debates, and so it's a very holistic kind of education, and we have to reside in the premises, so it's very nice system, I think, and I learned a lot in my early life in my days in AFMC, and we still keep very close contact between our various batches. Our whole group is on WhatsApp or different forms, social media. We have reunions, and so, and people from AFMC have done very well in their respective fields. For example, one of my classmates is now was the former deputy DG of WHO, and is now the scientific officer. She was also head of ICMR. So a lot of people do pretty well in their professions. After AFMC, I decided not to join the army because I wanted to do my post-graduation. So I left the medical school. I did internship, and then I joined BJ Medical College, and I did my post-graduation from BJ Medical College. And it was there when I met my husband, and all my intentions of going to the United States. I landed up marrying my husband, and then was the journey towards coming to Japan. My first visit to Japan was more or less tagging along with my husband, because he was invited for the Festival of India. He was senior curator at that time of Raja Kelkar Museum, which was just taken over by the government of India at that time, and he was a government appointee, and so he came here to curate that exhibition as one of the 5 museum heads from India. And I was very much interested in allergy, not knowing much about the field, but because we had lots of patients who had allergies, but we never knew how to treat them. And that made me feel very helpless. And I said, okay, if I have a chance to learn about allergies, that'll be something that I can give back to my patients and help them. My whole intention was to go to the United States, and my husband Umesh had done his internship in museology after his education in MS University Baroda. He's done his internship in Smithsonian. So he was to also go back to Smithsonian. But because of this trip to Japan, I came along with him and came to understand that there's a lot about allergy happening in Japan education. And then I was invited here, and I received a scholarship called the Japanese Association of University Women, which is given to women from any field of unrelated to just medicine. So a journalist and me were the 2 people who were selected for that year. It was just a 6 months scholarship. But having come here, then I started doing clinical work, but also research, which was absolutely new to me, and it's was very tough because, you know, in India, at least in those days, there was no system of research education in medical schools. It was just pure clinical work, and that's partly because of the workload. But now, of course, there's more focus on research, whereas Japan always had that focus on research along with the clinical work. So I started doing also clinical work, working late hours till about 3:30 at night, going back home and then back to work at 7:30 in the morning. And I had the opportunity to work with some of the top people in Japan, like Tomio Tada and Ko Okumura, and I specialized in allergy. And so while doing this doctorate and training in allergy, I realized that allergy is such a huge field. It's not just by allergic rhinitis or a sneezing or something. There's asthma, there's food allergies, there's anaphylaxis, drug allergies, urticaria, eczema. So, and it affects all ages of people. So I wanted to go deeper and deeper into that, and that's how I continue to work in the field of allergy. My road to becoming the president of the World Allergy Organization was actually very, it's more like a destiny, because I never ever, it wasn't in my radar. I just was interested in doing good publications that gave new evidence, that would build the evidence for future treatments, good science, and also the clinical work. And in the process, I got picked up to be a board member of the World Allergy Organization. As I worked in the organization, I was able to, produce a lot of initiatives, and I was very active. And then I got selected to be the incoming president. I was elected in 2009, and then I became the first woman president 2012 and 2013 in 62 years. Yeah, I mean, the system in India, the medical system also is different from the medical system here in Japan. And since I was very, very poor in Japanese language, I mean, and the hospitals, unlike in the other universities where cultural areas where you have more people speaking more of English, I was like really handicapped without having Japanese language knowledge. So I worked very hard to study Japanese, but I learned in two ways by myself: by learning the script, and then also learning through daily conversations and the medical language through books. And over time I was able to achieve that. Took me 2.5 years actually to do it. And then of course in initial phase we used to actually have our medical records also in English, but now of course it's all electronic medical records, and I can do it in Japanese, so it's not a problem at all. And yes, I mean, knowing the language has really helped. Culturally, yes, of course, I mean, the Japan and India have always had a very, very close relationship, very warm relationship and of friendship, from the time of even the war, post-war, the PAL had helped Japan, so, yes. And Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was here, so there was a lot of Tagore and Kurosawa had communication. There were a lot of things, but culturally, of course, it's quite different. And so there were cultural differences which, I gradually seeped into me and was difficult to understand, because here you need to understand the body language and not just the verbal language. So it took me time, and there were challenges. And also there were challenges in the workplace, because there are not many women who actually go into the profession and rise high, whereas in India it's very common for women. I mean, there's no barrier. I've never faced a barrier as a female to succeed in my profession. I mean, there might be small ceilings everywhere, I'm not saying, but here it was truly a glass ceiling. But like I said, my idea was not to break the glass ceiling, but just to work. My focus was work and to try to do the best. And in whatever role I was given, I wanted to produce the best results. And the results led to everything else.